Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm your soul brother, Talib, coming here to you live on Hangout this afternoon. Um, you know, Today in this live Hangout, you know, which I choose to title as "Who is truly the worst enemy of the black man?" You know, we need to sit up here and have a serious question of intelligent conversation. We need to ask ourselves, some intelligent questions as well as you know, reasonable as well as civil questions, you know. And we ain't got to turn this into an argument. Let's just have intelligent and conversation, especially for those of you who may be in the live hangout chat room, I mean, because, or rather to say in the comment section, because this thing about, like it's been, promoted for years, especially in the black conscious community, that the Caucasian European or the white man and other names we refer to the unquote white man by, even in terms of calling him the devil, unquote, or the serpent or the dragon, unquote, and all these other things we may choose to refer to the Caucasian as, has been deemed for years among our people in the conscious so-called black community, or rather the so-called conscious black community, to say that he is the devil, he is our natural enemy, and that, but yet we have to really revisitly analyze this because, like the Nation of Islam teach that Yaqub, who was not only a black scientist, but according to Elijah Muhammad in the Message of the Black Man of America, that this guy was also a black devil himself, who was considered as the mad scientist that created the unquote white man. Okay, now in other sectors of the black conscious community, including the Nuwabians, which is an organization I once found myself being a part of years ago, you know, um, would say that in a similar manner that, the Caucasian came from the black man. Okay, so with that said, now the question is, if the black man is the first man on the planet, or the unquote black race is the first people on the planet Earth, and the first civilizations of human, uh, who turns out to be dark-skinned people with woolly hair, came straight out of the continent of Africa in terms of, once again, the beginning of human civilization. Where did the Caucasian then, who's supposed to be the devil and the black man's most worstest natural enemy, get his, hate behaviors and habits from? Whether even they were negative or positive. Because, there's some Caucasians in this world that definitely have some positive character traits about them. Matter of fact, more so than the so-called black man and woman, who I, usually refer to as dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America. Now, I must say this, once again, where did the Caucasian get his devilish, negative character traits from in terms of behavior and habits? Well, it's the positive ones, side of the ones, Where did he get it from? Since we are the creators of the Caucasian. Oh, by the way, and many of us in the conscious community have resigned to the belief concept that every other race beside the Caucasian or every other group of people in this world, ethnicity-wise, came from us. Okay, so you have to be talking about the yellow, Oriental Asian, the so-called red man called the Native American, and so forth and on. Okay. Now, with that once again said, if the white man is the devil and is supposed to be dark-skinned people's natural worst enemy, then wouldn't it be that we were the first devils in human personification here on this planet Earth? I mean, see, we got to ask ourselves these questions. I mean, because as years went by, when I was being taught these kind of things as a Nubian, which I'm no longer am, nor as me being a part of that organization any longer. But I mean, we have to relearn, not only relearn, but unlearn a lot of things. Because see, it's too many kinks, in these old narratives, when you talking about the fictitious characters with the two pitchforks and all this kind of stuff, and two horns coming out their head and all that. That's just nothing but simply fairy tale stuff. And I mean, to describe other human beings like that, regardless of the color of their skin, it's just simply don't register, And see, we use this narrative basically, especially those of our people among the so-called conscious community, as a way to, escape reality in terms of being able to take responsible for their own actions of who they are individually or as humans or as a group, as far as humans is concerned. And I mean, we've taken this thing too far and too extreme to the point that we got our people believing this crazy madness. Like a mad scientist by the name of Yakub, once again, created the Caucasian devil, grafted him and all this other kind of stuff. And from the brown germ, from the darker germ to the brown germ and all this other kind of stuff, okay? It's nothing but confusion. And at the end of the day, it causes it to be more apparent that this is definitely, in fact, the second death behind Christianity when it comes to our people's minds being distorted in our ways of thinking and seeing things and viewing life in general, as well as just viewing the world, period, And I mean, it's like, it's taking our people to the point where you would think that, in fact, a lot of our people, even the ones who don't take what they call psychotic medications, may need to be on them just because of that warped type of thinking, and I mean, at the end of the day, when you really think about it, a lot of us may need to be going to somewhere to see a counselor to get diagnosed, or some are going to see a doctor to get diagnosed. Because I mean, we went too far with this pro-black conscious stuff. It's just ran us crazy, you know. And I mean, at the end of the day, getting on to my point is that when we all, basically, are confronted with the question of who in fact is the true enemy of the black man. Well, I'm gonna borrow something from the page of Marcus Garvey, who once said that the black man is his worst enemy. And I can accept that because facts indicate that, not because of the color of the skin though. So let's not get this misunderstood. Not because of the color of the skin, but because of what's within the human being, the character traits, meaning the mentality, the way of thinking, the way of, just how people do things, and the way we carry ourselves and act socially among other people. So it don't initially have nothing to do with the skin color. Once again, the races who are the Caucasians, where our knowledge came from in terms of so-called black consciousness, and those of us that are dark-skinned, that is within the so-called black conscious community, breeds this type of mentality, not only within themselves, but within others. And this is why, once again, as I said before, this has taken us to the point of mental death further, as well as second behind Christianity, and this even has made us more of religious fanatics, even than so those of us in Christianity. This is to the point where we kill somebody because they don't believe what we say. They don't think the way that some of us may think. So we just kill them. Just like in the case of what happened between the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X. For one good prime example, And so, I mean, this thing, when you talk about who is the enemy, well, like I discussed with a brother of ours named Taalik from the platform that I come from of Reality Temple Ministries on Earth, basically, like we were talking about, is that I could go into many details, that dictates who is really my enemy as a dark-skinned person myself. I could go into details on what other people who look like me have done or tried to do to me in harmful manners that I can't really speak and say about the Caucasian other than, you know, situations that have arose here and there over time, especially if certain situations is related, of course, to racism, because this is the type of society we live in. Let's face it, it is what it is on that level, you know. But my thing is this, is that, you know, I can't really say that the Caucasian has done nearly as equal to me in terms of negative harm as other dark-skinned people who look like me. I can't say, I just can't really equally compare like that. And I'm gonna tell you something also. Once again, this ain't got nothing to do with skin color at this point, because if the Caucasian did anything to me, whether it was a police drawing a gun on me, once again, it was either related to racism or it was related to something, or could have been related to something, let's say, that I put myself in a position in terms of happening to me. Like a lot of these brothers and sisters out here now, more recently getting killed by these racist cops, usually it happened that they put themselves in a position for that by provoking the racists, as I've spoken about in other videos, you know. So we got to think before we call the white man our worst enemy. Or our most worst natural enemy. You know, we have to really analyze that before we just open up our mouths and come to that type of conclusion, you know. Because as I said before, you know, here it is. I'm living in a not big city, not a small town, but a medium-sized, big, small city with just over, what, maybe barely 300,000 people here in Nebraska. And, you know, I am living amongst majority Caucasians, beside the other darker skinned people that's in this area where I'm located at. And that not only includes other smaller portions of populations of darker skinned descendants of slaves born in America, but other darker skinned people like Latinos, African immigrants, Arabs, Orientals, Asians, whatever you may call it. And but other than that, I mean, I don't, since I've been here for the past few years, I haven't had that many problems, even in terms of my safety being in jeopardy, you know. And fortunately, in the case of where I stand at and where I exist at in terms of the location that I'm living in, you know. But at the same time, considering all that, I haven't really had no problems. Why I had to constantly look over my shoulders. Like, oh, I ain't do it. You know, that type of thing. You know what I mean? Or, you know how I go in the so-called urban repositories of the United States, like a Chicago or Detroit or Baltimore or Newark, New Jersey, or Oakland, California, you know, or New Orleans, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I mean, Atlanta, Georgia, Washington, D.C., you know, Gary, Indiana. I'm just saying, and it's like, I just have to really look at that and be honest, not only with myself, but with even those, even in general, whether I'm speaking with you on this level, it's on social media and throughout the whole entirety of YouTube land, but also whether I'm just dealing with people on the general everyday basis as far as face to face level, I haven't really I can't really say that I have these type of problems here as I would in those other localities that I just named around different other parts of the United States as a dark skinned person, and at the end of the day, because of my experience, even in terms of traveling, and to have been to dozens of states around this country, from the east to the west coast, from the north to the south, and so forth on. I mean, it's like I I just can't say that I've experienced feeling more um threatened constantly, that I might get harmed by some Caucasian. And it might sound funny to those of you who may be dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America watching this live hangout. You know, it may sound awkward that I'm saying this, but the reality is like I said, when you're dealing with the human being, and let's like take the color or pigmentation out of it. When you're dealing with the human being itself, the mentality and the aura is terms in the way of thinking, that produces the physical or moral activity, or well as oral activity in people, regardless of what your color may be. My thing is that I have to say that, I can't see, once again, in one whole nutshell, all the boil down to it, how can the Caucasian be my worstest or most natural worstest enemy when I, like I said, had things done to me by other people who look like me on a more dangerous level than in the case of my interactions and encounters with Caucasians or even other different ethnicity groups of people in this country. So we have to really ask ourselves, who is the natural enemy of the black man? Who is the black man's worstest enemy? Well, I guess so far what I've said, I hope that may be getting to the point of answering your question, which will lead to further what I got to say in this live hangout, before I close out. But I must just say that you know, right here where I live at, here in Nebraska, you know, I've had to deal with more obstacles in terms of opposition coming from darker skinned people than Caucasians. And of course, don't get me wrong, whenever it's a problem, we're dealing with the average Caucasian like anywhere else in America. One is going to assume that racism has something to do with it. And of course, one has a legitimate reason to feel that way because of all the history that surrounds dark-skinned people and Caucasians' relationship in this country, which is surrounding a lot of history of racism and discrimination and so forth on, So, I mean, one, as myself, of course, as a dark-skinned descendant of a slave born in America, will have a legitimate reason to feel like that. But, not saying that it may be that case all the time, but one still, as myself, will have a reason legitimately to feel that way, okay? But when you're dealing with your own kind, that's a whole nother different entire subject as well. You would want to expect, I'll put it that way, for things to be more on the equal level, whether it's on the understanding level, a mutual respect level, or just dealing in harmony altogether. But of course, that's just not the case among dark-skinned descendants of slaves born here in America and darker-skinned people around the world, even in general, as of that matter. But I speak mostly because I am a member who's from among dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America. So that's where I'm particularly aimingly keeping this subject focused on in terms of who is the worst enemy of black people, And my thing is this, is that, like I say, to even sit up and call white people the devil, being that we are the unquote original people of the planet Earth, as far as black people being concerned. And, with all these other ideology narratives, like we supposed to have 76 trillion years of knowledge, but yet this planet Earth is said or estimated by scientists that, this planet has only just been around a few billions of years. So, I mean, come on, it's a problem. Obviously, it just indicates that there's nothing but kinks. And this is what opens up the doors for continuous questions, And this is why I am glad, definitely, that I emancipated myself from the so-called black conscious community. Because, they had me going too. Just like they still got many thousands of you who are a part in some way or what of the so-called black conscious community. They even almost had me to the point of believing that, and nothing against gay people, but that they had, me believing that there were dark-skinned, woolly-haired, homosexual or homo sapien, however they want to call that, but it's related to homosexuals, that they had homo sapien angelic beings to guard the gates of the tabernacle or wherever in Africa. Some millions or whatever years ago, or however that might have been. And this information came from the organization I once affiliated myself with, which is the Nubians. Dr. Malachi Z. York, who is currently incarcerated in the U.S. Super Maximum Federal Penitentiary in Florence, Colorado, with a 135-year sentence hanging over his head. But I mean, as I was saying before, I mean, all this crazy stuff. And then even in his books, he related a lot of things to homosexuality that just didn't, amount up to anything right. It just something it just didn't amount up to correctly. Why would you, if you're supposed to be about the liberation of dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America, and was supposed to have been leading us to the promised land and all this other stuff, as well as to the mother plane ship called the Burrow that was supposed to have been coming to retrieve us from which you say this hell on earth or whatever. I mean, come on. This is the type of stuff that I was believing, yes. And I apologize to myself most and forth for allowing myself in that situation, but I can't cry with spilt milk, because when I got involved with his organization, when it was going through the stages of Islam, when it was known as the Ansar Allah community, or the so-called Nubian Islamic Hebrew mission, I was a young 18-year-old, who didn't know from my back to my front, who was just straight up completely lost, as I even foremost realize now. Then what I realized then. I was just totally lost like a lot of other younger people, that were dark skinned, that embraced his teachings at that time and even since then, and that even embraced his teachings prior to me embracing his teachings as well, because his organization had been around, they claim, since the 60s, but it was supposed to have been initially established in the early 1970s, in Brooklyn, New York. But anyway, moving along, I mean, it's like when I look at this kind of stuff, and then even with the distorted teachings and what I relate to the brother Taalik on, as far as the Nation of Islam is concerned, being that he was once a member of the Nation of Islam under Louis Farrakhan's leadership, So me and him come from the same place, similarly, in terms of that so-called black conscious crap. And this is why we get along so well, because we have so much empathy and identifying with each other, about all this craziness that distorted and warped our way of thinking, and at the end of the day, I mean, it's like, like I say, it's like a refreshing, fresh breath air, It's like they said in that movie years ago, exhale. It's like a fresh breath of exhale, since I emancipated myself from them so-called black conscious teachings, and I don't regret it, not one moment, because I mean, it really got to the point to where it started making me more realize that the unquote black man, whether it was my individual self or other darker skinned people that look like me, as being my worst enemies, more so than I was at the point of looking at the Caucasian as being my worst enemy. And at that point, those signs there were letting me know, hey, it's time for you to, step outside and think outside the box for yourself and look at this thing on a more clear basis without being under the control of what they call the teachings. You know what I'm saying? Or the so-called divinity guide of some savior or prophet or so-called black messiah, because at the end of the day, all that ain't done nothing in terms of merely liberating us from our 400-year Caucasian oppressor. That's all we're concerned with. Matter of fact, coming from this platform, as we've mentioned so many times, as far as me and brother Taalik, Ibn'rad, aka Angel Snup Snup 7, and I just have to say that coming from this platform of Reality Temple Ministries on Earth, I mean, it's like I have to realize and understand that at the end of the day, as well as we all need to understand and realize, those of us that I'm mainly am referring to as dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America, that the white man is not your worstest enemy, as you've been taught over the years, especially from those in the so-called, Afrocentric, black conscious teachings. We are basically our own enemies, our own worstest enemies, going back to what Marcus Garvey said almost 100 years ago. And that's a fact. I mean, if you look at all the stuff we're doing to each other, on a mere, negative term of speaking, I mean, just look at all the stuff we're doing to each other, killing each other over trivial stuff, like over wearing different colors of clothing texture, killing each other because someone glared at somebody else the wrong way or whatever the case was. That type of stuff. I mean, because somebody was looking at somebody's girlfriend or looking at somebody's boyfriend and so forth on, and all that crazy stuff. So now you got a bunch of, not just thousands, but even at this point up into the millions of us sitting behind steel bars or steel door cell doors, looking stupid. Like, how in the hell did I get myself in this? Was it because of self-hate? And don't sit up and tell me that it was only the Caucasian. This was only because of the Caucasian either. Because, if you want to go back to prehistoric European colonialism times and prehistoric slave times, prior to European colonialism as well as slavery and all that other stuff concerning our relations with the Caucasian, we had a lot of hatred toward each other as darker skinned people. Then, that's why all them nations on the continent of Africa can't even come together and unite against those like the Asians and even still the Caucasians that is raping them of all their natural resources over there. And why they steadily killing each other on a wholesale level, like in the Congo, Rwanda, Somalia, the Sudan, Nigeria, and different other places throughout the continent of Africa. Just killing each other wholesale. And with that said, this is the same reason why those of us, whether we were already here when we were kidnapped into slave bondage, or whether some of us came from Africa or the Caribbean or whatever, this is the reason why we can't unite. Because somewhere we were brought in a forced situation over here in America to begin with. Because without us being forced into slavery, more likely we wouldn't even have nothing to do with each other as a people. We were forced all together. And since we are here as a whole new different people from the rest of the darker skinned population of the planet Earth, we should be trying to carve out a different existence for ourselves. But yet, because of self-hatred, remember, we came from different tribes too. All of us did not come from Africa, as it's been, contemporarily taught in history. Like I said, some of us came from over there, some of us came from the Caribbean, and some of us, of course, of dark skin pigmentation as well as woolly hair, were already here in America, or here in North America. So like I said, once again, we were breeded into a new people, of course, mixed with Caucasian blood, Native American blood, and all this other stuff, But yet we're none of those people. We are totally, entirely different, new mixed people. And see, one thing about the mulatto, who's born to a Caucasian or dark, as well as a dark-skinned parent, at least they understand that they come from two different cultures. Okay, you could say what you want to say about them, but they do understand that they were born to multiple different cultures instead of just one. Okay, we don't have that realization of knowing that we are from all these different people and that we're mixed ourselves. And this is what produces the self-hatred, because of all these different cultures and different tribes we came from. Then you wonder why we as a group of people called darker skinned descendants of slaves born in America cannot unite. Trust me, that has a lot to do with it. You see, that has a lot to do with it. That has a lot to do with the self-hatred among us. That has a lot to do with us always constantly aiming to tear each other down. That has a lot to do with how we look at each other in terms of economic class status. How we look at each other in terms of just characteristic status, and how it's so much that we judge each other in such a negative way as well over these things, and this is why we cannot unite, unfortunately, and that's just a fact. As I would critique my brother Taalik saying, that's a fact. So, like I said before, at the end of the day, we have to understand and realize that, hey, the question boils down to who in fact is the unquote black man and woman's natural enemy in America. With all I just said, that points straight directly to you and I, black man and woman here in America, who I choose to refer to as dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America, or people of soul, also. But like I said before, this is the thing that we have to understand and realize, that we are a people, that just, we have a lot of kinks in terms of misunderstanding of really who our true enemy is, and not stepping outside the color boundary, or stepping outside the color boundary range to really think about who is really my enemy. Because what we do to ourselves, more so worse than anybody else, of course, reflects on the answer of who in fact is our true enemy. And this is what we got to understand and realize. This is what we got to understand and realize. Because if we don't understand and realize this, we're going to always be confused as to who in fact is the enemy, the true enemy of the dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America. We're going to have to really, and this is why I decided to put this video out, because it's been so much distortion and confusion among our people, not just in the so-called conscious community, but throughout the whole entire group of us as dark-skinned descendants of slaves born in America, that, we don't really even know who our enemy is. And one thing about it is this, is that far as our dark-skinned descended chattel slave ancestors are concerned in this country, yes, for them, which has nothing to do with us, but for them, they understood and knew directly who their enemy was, which at that time was the Caucasian. Directly, no question, because they were in no position to determine otherwise who their enemy was, like we are in today. So they directly knew face to face who the enemy was. Okay. But on the other note, those of us in today's generation of darker skinned descendants of slaves born in America, we don't understand concretely and directly who the enemy really is. Because, okay, on one hand, you could sit up and say the white man is the enemy, but to a certain extent, the white man being the enemy, I still don't have a problem with, but he's not our natural enemy in terms of being an unquote devil, as the conscious community would describe as. No. In terms of what they still doing to us as a people, far as discrimination, gerrymandering laws, racial profiling, police brutality, so-called discriminatory mass incarceration. Yes, you can view the Caucasian in that way as an enemy, but that ain't got nothing to do with the color of their skin. That's just their actions due to their mentality. That don't have nothing to do with because they are the natural devil, the natural enemy of the black man, or the so-called divine cursed devil. It don't got nothing to do with that at all. That's nothing but religious fairy tale crap. Okay. Because if it was the other way around and we had the upper hand, trust me, the stuff that they doing to us, we'll probably be doing the same thing to them. Remember, we had the dark-skinned Moor conquerors of Europe. And had they not been defeated by the Christians and Jews in Spain, the whole entire continent of Europe would have been Islamic. And that's a fact. That's a fact. The Egyptians, they wasn't all, as they would say in terms of religion, saints. You know. Or as in religion, as they would say, good Samaritans. All of them wasn't that type of such people either. They were conquerors as well as colonists. Not only among themselves within the continent of Africa, but also taking their customs and ways and conquering other parts of the earth outside of Africa. And for those of you who are in the conscious community talking about you do your research, well, go back and do your research on that. So if black people would have had it the other way around, I'm pretty sure Caucasians would be looking at us in the same manner. Oh, that's our natural enemy. No, no, no. It all boils down to human terms of characteristics and in a way of mentality thinking. That's what that boils down to. And it ain't got nothing to do with nothing else. Once you take the equation of the religion spooky aspect of things out of there, it has nothing to do with that. Period. It ain't got nothing to do with that. And, with that said, I hope I got across to you, those of you, whether you're in the comment section or on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're at in social media watching this live hangout. I hope you got something out of this. And if you have any comments, I would like to say jot them down and I'll get back with you. And with that said,